And we are live. As always, if you support these videos, this work, this labor of love, go ahead and not only smash that like button and subscribe button, but also the join button. And you can join at either $25, $5, or $1 a month. You could also head over to patreon.com/Aksum, patreon.com/Aksum. Spider-Man. Let's get into it. First, I want to say that there's this idea that I talk about a lot in politics as well as religion of populism versus elitism. And my love for some of these blockbuster films, whether they come out in the summer or the winter, I think is an example of how this idea could manifest even in the film world. And I'm the real film critic, just a YouTuber. But there are some movies that people write off from the jump because they're blockbusters, because they were created for mass audience appeal, and because they think that in some shape, way, or form, they are special, they are unique, just like every snowflake, not how it's used politically, but the literal snowflakes and how unique they are and how special they are, how different they are, how set apart from the crowd. So a movie like Spider-Man wouldn't be meant for them because they are an elitist, because they strive for excellence, and nothing made for mass appeal could be excellent. Let me just say from the jump that I disagree. So, I am a person who believes in hierarchy, who believes in stratification, who believes in the striving after excellence, the setting of a high standard for everyone, and for everyone to aim to be the best they can at whatever it is they do. Literally, any field, any production, self employed or employed, anything that you can imagine. If you're doing something as opposed to doing nothing, be the best at it. And shit, if you're doing nothing, be the best at doing nothing. Being a flaneur is good if you have the FU money that accompanies that lifestyle and that facilitates that lifestyle. So, anyway, I am not the person who writes off movies just because they're produced for a mass audience. And at the same time, I am the person who strives for excellence in everything that I do. Now, it doesn't mean that you allow yourself to be trapped and ensnared by analysis paralysis, because being a perfectionist is great in terms of quality control of what you release. But if you don't release anything, let's say you have 5, 10 projects that you release and they're of the utmost quality, but someone else releases something slightly less uh, quality, with slightly less quality equivalents, but their output makes you look like a sloth, makes you look like molasses. That latter person, in my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion, would be better than you. So, in any event, there's a balance between populism and elitism in your personal life and how it bleeds into politics, religion, and film. And as regards to film, I do not write movies off. I don't say that I won't watch it just because the target audience is not the few, but the many. So put that out there. My history with Spider Man, I've read Marvel comics, never super consistently, but especially during the Civil War saga. I think I read every comic from everything in the Civil War saga. It was very um it was a very compelling series, and I read a bunch of the stuff from Planet Hulk and the zombie stuff too. But it was around 2008 to 2010, from late high school to early college. I've read far more manga, which is to say Japanese graphic novels, than I have American ones. But of the American ones, I've read some good DC. Around the same time period, I read the graphic novel for what Alan Moore's The Watchmen before it was put onto the screen, actually in preparation for that. But anyway, I think I've watched several different cartoon series of Spider-Man and watched all the movies that have come out. Even the Miles Morales version we'll get to very briefly later. But I've been a fan. The 90s Amazing Spider-Man, I think it was. There was another older one, Hanna-Barbera, with like friends, like other superheroes, and then a newer one in the 2000s. I pretty watched all of those series whenever they came out. So longtime Spider-Man fan, bring it to another realm. So not just the comic graphic novel, not just the cartoon, not just the movies, but the video games as well, especially Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2. But I also played individual Spider Man games on the PlayStation and Xbox, the various versions that came out, but especially Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2. I really like the Spider Man character, and they made Deadpool very similar, and I've always liked the anti-heroes more than the heroes. When I was really young, I think you just end up liking the heroes more. But as I got older, the anti-heroes like Moon Knight, like Punisher, like Deadpool always stuck out to me. And in the video games, at least, they made Deadpool and Spider-Man have similar movements and similar abilities, even though obviously they have different powers. And I ended up liking Deadpool more. The immortality there probably helps that cause. But it's just to let you know, I've played Spider-Man video games, I've read Spider-Man comics, I've watched the movies of Spider-Man as well. So it's a all-encompassing fan of Spider-Man. The Holy Scriptures always end with the blessing and begin with the curse, as opposed to what other people do. So um, I like to follow that format as well. DW Ethiopia, I see your question. I'll try to get to it, and I'll answer it first, but I want to get out my thoughts. I won't take too long, just a few more minutes, and then I'll address your question. So, um, I like to say the negative things first, and I don't have a lot of negative things to say. It's an overall good review, overall positive review. Very rarely do I come out here and do negative reviews. I will do them sometimes, and maybe sometimes it's more 50-50. I think There Will Be Blood is one of those movies I unequivocally tell people I think was horrible, even though it got so many rave reviews from critics. But I'm generally softer on these kind of blockbusters, and I'm entertained. I was entertained by the movie. I liked it. It was feel good. It wasn't too cookie cutter, and we'll explain. But the one kind of negative thing, and this is going to be a spoiler, so if you're afraid of spoilers, just leave now. Don't be here. Just watch the movie and then come back to it, and allow my words to help you think about and reflect upon the movie. Or if you don't care about spoilers, watch it now. There's kind of an MIB moment or a Men in Black moment at the end where through magic he has his girlfriend MJ and his best friend Ned forget about him. And I didn't see how that was necessary to the plot. Now these things are a long series, so maybe it'll make sense. It'll be very hard for me to believe that they're going to totally erase those characters and never bring them back, but it raises kind of an interesting moral and ethical dilemma. Is it better to have close contacts and put them in danger because of your superhero identity? Or is it better that you were never friends and a significant other in the first place, and that their safety is the number one concern? So that's an ethical and moral dilemma you have to work out for yourself. And you see how the character Spider-Man in the film, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, works this out. By the way, in the lead up to this film, I'm a fan of the historian, the British historian Tom Holland. I listen to his podcast, The Rest is History. So it's always funny when people confuse the two Tom Hollands, the one, the Spider-Man actor, and the other, the British historian who's also a podcaster. And I think for the first time, usually it goes one way, the other. I think the British historian is less well known than the Spider-Man actor, but I saw people actually confusing the Spider-Man actor for the British historian. And it's always great when there is a reversal of that. And maybe there's something to the populism, elitism debate that goes back to that. He's a historian of Christianity, of Rome, I think even of the Silk Road, maybe Persia and stuff like that. But most recently, I was listening to a podcast of his with fellow historian Dominic on World War One and on Alexander the Great and other great topics like that. So anyway, my only negative thing is the MIB or the Men in Black moment where he kind of takes a stance in that moral ethical dilemma to erase from memory his friend and his best friend and his uh, significant other's relationship with him. I wouldn't do something like that. I think safety is definitely an utmost concern, but if you got powers, you can be discreet. There are certain things you can do to be more discreet in the way that you live. And, maybe you don't have to go to MIT. Maybe there are other ways to live life than attending MIT, but God bless MIT and everyone who goes there. So the budget of this movie, I think, is a huge aspect of how they were able to do everything they want to do. Disney is just greater. They own everything. You see, like, a little shout out to Star Wars, where he has a Star Wars figurine or Star Wars toy, and that's obvious promotion for another one of the many franchises that Disney owns. Disney also owns, like, ESPN, which plays the UFC, which I watch a lot. Disney is really an incredible organization. They had the money to bring back Tobey Maguire, to bring first Spider-Man there in recent times, bring back Andrew Garfield as a second Spider-Man, and I watched Ben Shapiro's review of it. You kind of get the mimetics of the three Spider-Mans pointing to each other. So you have little kind of childish humor, or more slapstick humor, but also deeper moments and even more intelligent humor throughout the film, but also some dark moments, some serious moments between the three of them, some tying of the knots of each of their stories. You have Jamie Foxx, who comes in as Shocker, and here's where Miles Morales comes in. He sees Andrew Garfield's character, and he was expecting, by the kind of duties of a Spider-Man and the area in which he resides, that he would be black. And so it's kind of a hat tip to the Miles Morales version of Spider-Man from the animated version, which I think is great too. And you all can watch that. He's, of course, an Afro Latino. You have Doc Ock, who comes in as a great villain, the Lizard Man, the Sandman, who's switching back and forth between hero and villain. Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, I have to mention him. I just think he's one of my favorite actors ever. The Boondock Saints is one of the most crazy violent movies, but one of my favorite movies all time. I've watched it multiple times. It's probably always in my top 10. And he's able to play this villain who has a little bit of the schizophrenia, the Jekyll Hyde, the Hulk, where he's a passive great scientist, and then he's this evil villain. And I think he plays both of those characters very well. I think of the kind of older men actors when I think about who are able to play really diverse roles. Willem Dafoe and Gary Oldman stick out to me, from the DC universe. Gordon in Batman, right? The police commissioner. And so I think Green Goblin reminds me of the kind of humorist sadism of the Joker, especially Heath Ledger's Joker. That's the really only modern superhero villain character I can think of that comes to mind. And it's really incredible. It's really incredible the way that it works, because they allow him to kill people and to do serious harm and damage in a way that they don't allow the other villains to do that. And you see the same thing with Joker in the Batman series in the DC universe. So I appreciate that aspect about them. And to continue on with the review, there's this great line with one of the characters he kills. Again, spoiler alert, I've been saying it. Aunt May, who mirrors the other multiverse's usage of Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. I think, number one, that rings true. I don't know if it means you have to accept the moral mission of Aunt May, that you absolutely have to try to convert every villain into a hero unto your death, until sacrifice. But you see it with Aunt May, and you see it with the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man within this film. And this sort of sacrificial love is what's talked about in Scripture. In John chapter 15, it says, "There is no greater love than this, than when a person lays down their life for somebody else." So this sacrificial love, or the willingness and the desire, not just willingness, but the desire to lay down your life for somebody else, is considered in scripture the greatest form of love. So to see that expressed in a nominally secular film with aliens and villains and superheroes and all this is something great to see. And I think is one of the more beautiful aspects. And you can agree with the principle that Aunt May and Uncle Ben in the other universe express, while disagreeing with the kind of finer points of when to instantiate or when to implement this sacrificial love, and to what extent will you implement this sacrificial love in your life and then recommend it into the lives of others, because she's the mentor, motherly figure to the Tom Holland Spider-Man. And in the end, a shout out to Ben Shapiro again, because he pointed out that Jonathan Simmons, or the J.K. Simmons news report, news anchor character, is a caricature of the real life Alex Jones. And I thought the same thing when I was watching the film. I didn't think it in older versions of Marvel, but what made this version different is there's a moment where he's just straight up, in addition to the guerrilla or the guerrilla journalism or the gonzo journalism, he's explicitly selling supplements as an aside. And I had never seen that in any other Spider-Man movie. Maybe I had missed it, but I've been hip to Alex Jones since 2004. So almost 20 years now, 18 years. And so I've been familiar with the character, and I never saw such an obvious homage. And it reminds me of Marvel Comics, kind of political tinge in what they're doing, how they made the kind of Red Skull Nazi character into Jordan Peterson. And so you see what they're kind of, who they're trying to villainize and why they're trying to do it. And you laugh when you see something like that. But I don't think it ultimately detracted from the film. As I said, that kind of Alex Jones homage and the Men in Black making everybody forget are the two things that I think detracts from the film. But the way in which they had the budget and the will to include all of the heroes and all of the villains from all of these films, and the way that they made a cohesive story that brings together all of these people and has Doctor Strange as the kind of in and out character who doesn't have the most screen time, but is the impetus for the multiverse, or the allowance of the setting and context in which it makes sense for all of these characters to be interacting with each other. And that it worked well. It allowed for collaboration. It allowed for the tying of the knot, or the closing of a lot of these character arcs and these stories. I thought was beautiful. The cinematics, obviously, again with the budget, were beautiful. And the ability to mix the darkness and the seriousness of loss of life, of sacrificial love, and with more PG or childish humor, I think makes this a great movie, and I recommend it for you. And I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. At this point, I'll go into whatever questions people have. Right now, I just see a question from DW Ethiopia, and I'll address it. But if anyone else starts adding questions, and especially if you add super chats and super stickers, of course, I'm going to answer your questions to the best of my ability. I'll stay on for maybe 5 to 15 minutes to see if there are any questions. If DW Ethiopia is the only one with a question, I'll address theirs and I'll sign out. So formulate your thoughts. You also don't have to ask questions. You can share questions, comments, concerns, points of emphasis, or points of de-emphasis if you think I emphasized something too much. And please join the conversation, join the chat. So DW Ethiopia says, who is your favorite villain for Spider-Man? That's a great question. Of the villains that are in this film, I think there's no doubt that Green Goblin takes the case. And the reason is that most of the villains he encounters, they're more cookie cutter, straight up villains. But here, he's like 50% a hero that helps him come up with all of the solutions, and 50% the worst villain that brings him to the edge where he may cross the line and begin to kill villains, which would definitely turn him into an anti-hero like Moon Knight and like Punisher and like Deadpool. So within this film, it would be the Green Goblin for me. If I'm allowed to expand it to all of the Spider-Man characters, God, I'd have to think off the top of my head. Let's see if I could do some quick googling and look at all of the Spider-Man villains ever and see if it could jog my memory. Um, yeah, Hobgoblin is another interesting one. I do think Green Goblin is more interesting. Kingpin is interesting because he's human. Um, mm, Shocker was pretty strong. Craven the Hunter was one of my favorite ones from the cartoon Spider-Man. He's the kind of lion man. The Rhino and Scorpion, they're not that interesting to me. Yeah, if you want a more human villain, I think Kingpin is always an interesting one because he's so well connected and he has this ability to walk in these gray spaces between what is the law and what is not the law. But if you expanded it to the entire Marvel universe, again, I love the humorist sadism of the Green Goblin. Reminds me of the DC Universe's Joker. But if we expand it to the whole Marvel universe, my favorite villain in general is Doctor Doom. And, one of my favorite hip hop artists of all time who passed away last Halloween, allegedly, is Victor Von Doom, aka King Ghidorah, aka Mad Villain, aka MF Doom, all caps when you spell the villain's name or the super villain's name. So MF Doom made me love Doctor Doom even more, but Doctor Doom has a mixture of sheer brilliance, you could say madness, and then kind of just raw power. The thing about Green Goblin is I was kind of surprised. I didn't realize he had that much strength. He seemed almost like strength wise equivalent with Spider Man. Deviousness and diabolicalness wise, he's definitely up there. But I don't think he has this kind of overwhelming raw power. And so, Kingpin for the human element. If you love the emphasis on a more realistic character and less fantastical, Green Goblin. If you restrict it to this film, and if you have the entire Marvel universe, then I would say Doctor Doom because of the mixture of sheer brilliance, madness, and raw power that he brings makes him a really difficult villain to overcome. And probably it would be Spider-Man in crossover with the Fantastic Four or with some Avengers or with somebody else. So it would increase the scope of the battle and make it more interesting for that reason. I'll stay on for another 30 seconds to a minute. I see five of you on here right now. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, super chats, super stickers, please share them now or forever hold your peace before I dip out and wish you the blessing of the prayers of that righteous Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Happy MLK Day. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. No problem. Thanks for asking a question. Interaction is one of the reasons why I do the live events. Obviously, I pre-record a lot of my videos, and I think the benefit of pre-recording a lot of my videos is that the chats can sometimes get distracting. Today it's a lighter chat, but especially I've had days where they're really heavy chats. Um, I love foreign language movies that have subtitles, but it's hard for me to even read it's hard for me to even watch an English movie that also has English subtitles without reading the subtitles. And in the same way, it's hard for me to do a video while there are people chatting on the side and not just read everything you all have to say. I can't help myself in that way. Who knows what that is? But maybe it's an undiagnosed something. A lot of people on the internet refer to themselves with a lot of their self diagnoses. Anyway, if you don't have any other questions, comments, concerns, points of emphasis, those are my 2 pence or my 2 cents on Spider Man No Way Home. I recommend that you watch it. You could come back and share your thoughts with me in the comments if you weren't able to do so in the live session, and have a beautiful rest of your MLK day.